Hello and welcome to today's presentation. I'm Diane Okonski, President of the Icelandic National League of the United States, and I'm very happy you're able to join us today. I'll turn the program over to our host, Carrie Kozubal in California, and our guest, Virginia Laridsen in Iowa in just a minute. However, I want to just talk about one thing we've seen with this webinar in particular. We've seen several postings on social media regarding this webinar that include an incorrect link. Please remember that the correct link for attending any INLUS webinar or Authors Corner can be found on the INLUS events calendar at inlus.org. Clicking on any other link will be at your own peril, so please don't put yourself at risk. Okay, now for the standard logistics items. As attendees to the program, you are muted. However, we welcome questions and we will answer as many as possible during the program. To ask a question, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or if you are on a phone or a tablet, the button may be in the upper right corner, or you may have to swipe to find it, but don't let that stop you. Secondly, this program is being recorded and will be available through the INLUS website. So welcome, Virginia and Carrie. I'm looking forward to learning about the Icelandic horse industry. And Carrie, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Diane. Hi, everyone. Carrie Kozubal here again. Really excited to be talking to Virginia tonight about not only her experience and journey with the Icelandic horse in the US, but also her experience with the US IHC. And so we're going to have a chance to get to know Virginia, as well as hear about the really important role that the United States Icelandic Horse Congress is playing in the promotion and development of the breed here in the United States. So thanks for joining us tonight. As Diane mentioned, we want to hear your questions, so please do type them into the chat, not the Q&A, right, Diane? Yeah, into the chat. And okay,
and they need to type it into the Q&A box.
Okay, thank you. The Q&A. Thank you. And we'll get those questions asked and answered. So I would like to turn it over to Virginia. Virginia Laridsen. She has a full service Icelandic horse farm in Iowa. We're going to hear more about in just a moment. And she is the current president of the USIHC. So Virginia, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we would love to hear about your journey, how you became involved in Icelandic horses, because I think almost everyone in the United States started off with other breeds, doing other things. And so I love to hear how people learned about Icelandic horses and became involved.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a thrill for me to be here and discuss my favorite topic, the Icelandic horse. I was first introduced to Icelandic horses about 12 years ago. I was a competitive show jumper, had a huge Belgian warm blood, and I went on a business trip with my husband to Denmark. And one of the people who worked for the company knew that I was an equestrian, and so he offered to take me riding. And we went to the island of Rømø, and we rode Icelandic horses for 4 hours, and I never stopped laughing. I never stopped smiling. We went through the woods and on the beach and in the ocean, and we tolted and galloped, and I just had the time of my life. So about 2 months later, we went to Iceland, and I came home with 4 horses. And since then, I've had, at least 60 run through my farm, and breeding and selling and teaching and competing and just enjoying this incredible creature.
Wonderful. Well, tell us a little bit about how you became involved with the USIHC and what your role is now.
Well, it's actually kind of a funny story. Of course, I love to compete. Not that I care so much about the ribbon, but I just like to learn and get better and be part of the community. So I went to my first competition, which was in Kentucky. And my trainer from Iceland came with me. And of course, he knew everyone and I knew no one. And I didn't think they were very friendly. So I marched up to the then president, who is now a good friend of mine, and sort of got in his face and told him that they needed to be more welcoming. And I was really probably not very nice. And then the next day I walked up to him and reflected a little. And I said, well, I know I wasn't really very friendly. So I'll tell you what, I would love to help. And at the time I was a professor, and I said, I know a lot about education. And if there's any way I can help the Icelandic Horse Congress, I would love to do that. So he invited me to serve on the education committee, which I did for probably 4 or 5 years. And then they asked me to serve on the board for some reason. And then I became the breeding chair. And I wrote a breeding manual with my veterinarian about things that people should know when they're breeding horses. I had just started breeding and felt like there was a lot I didn't know. So I thought it would be a valuable tool. And then I served about 3 years as breeding chair, and then Will retired. Will was the previous president, and he sort of approached me about perhaps taking over. And then we had a little vote and I became president. There's my journey.
Willing to step up and do the work.
Well, I figure if you're going to complain, you should be willing to offer your services.
Excellent. Well, for those that aren't familiar with the USIHC and the role that it plays, I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about that. I'm sure there are a lot of people that might even own an Icelandic that may not be members of the USIHC, or people that maybe you're thinking about purchasing an Icelandic but haven't done it yet, and would like to hear a little bit about what the USIHC might offer to them.
Well, the USIHC is just a terrific resource for anyone who has any interest at all in Icelandic horses. We have about 800 members. We are growing. We publish a quarterly magazine with fantastic articles, anything from anomalies in the Icelandic horse blood spectrum to great training techniques. We have resources for breeders, resources for leisure riders, resources for competitors, interesting stories. There are club updates. We have 13 regional clubs in the USIHC that sponsor clinics and trail rides and shows and events. The USIHC offers help for breeders. It offers help for leisure riders. We have something called the Sea to Shining Sea, which is a virtual ride that brings the community together in kind of a fun way. I think the members are very open and welcoming and friendly. And if anyone has a question, you can find farms on the website in your region. We're not in every state. I think we're in about 20 states, somewhere in there. We have farms and they're listed on the website. All of the trainers, the certified trainers in the US are listed on the website. We have something called a riding badge program, and you can get information about that on the website. It's just a terrific resource for anyone who has any interest in the Icelandic horse.
I agree. It was really helpful. I joined before I even had my Icelandic horse because it is such a fantastic source of information about the breed, how to connect with other Icelandic horse owners, trainers, farms. It's a very valuable resource. I also love the education component, the fact that the USIHC brings trainers and farriers and breeders from Iceland, write articles for the magazine. The quarterly magazine is fantastic. You do webinars, you have youth programs.
Oh yes, we have a youth cup
every
every summer for kids, I think it's under 16. It's a week. This year we started these virtual webinars. And as you mentioned, we had a farrier, we had a saddle fitter, we had a breeding judge, we had a seminar on gaits, on the Icelandic horse gaits. And we do those through the winter months when everybody's a little less busy. But yeah, it's just a great education resource, and we all want that.
I agree. So tell me a little bit about your role as a breeder, as a trainer, as an ambassador to the breed. Tell me about some of the things that you are involved in personally, even beyond the USIHC.
Well, wow. The Icelandic horse is kind of central to my life now. I do breed. I don't breed. I'm not a huge breeder. I breed. I've bred about 8 foals, I think, at this point. I have 2 breeding mares. I have 1 stallion who, is at stud for others as well. And as president, I'm really the key to communicating with other organizations within Fife, which is the International Federation of the Icelandic Horse. And for instance, this year I traveled to Sweden to meet with the other people from Fife. I was the only one. No, Will Covert, the previous president, is now the chief of sport, the sport committee for Fife. And the year before I went to Norway, and we meet with the presidents and education chairs and breeding chairs, and there are lots of meetings for every committee, and we come together as a community. In the US, I'm a level 1 Fife trainer, certified trainer. So I teach lessons here at my farm. I have a competition track and a breeding track, pace track. We have about 1,000 acres and lots of trails. I also train young horses, and particularly the ones I've bred. I do not like to sell horses that are not trained. That's just me. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just my own feeling. So I feel that a lot of people who buy Icelandic horses are new to the breed, and if the horse doesn't have good foundational training, it can be difficult to find someone who knows the style of training to do, who knows how to teach the tolt, who knows how to keep it even. So that's my reasoning. But anyway, I'm pretty involved.
And you still work with a trainer from Iceland as well, right?
Oh yeah, he comes in twice a year for about 10 days, and I usually go to Iceland for about 10 days. So I spend a month of my life, or 10% of my life, close to it with Mummy. And yeah, we've been working together for over 10 years, so I feel very comfortable. I go to other clinics as well, and I work with other trainers when I have an opportunity, but I like having that connection with someone who has known me from the start.
It sounds like it's a very close-knit community, the Icelandic horse community in North America. I think we may have some folks from Canada watching tonight as well. And I know that at least here in the West Coast of the US and the West Coast of Canada, I think there are a lot of horses that go back and forth, and probably in the rest of the US as well. And I love the investment that trainers and breeders from Iceland are willing to make in seeing the breed develop here in North America.
Yeah, it's a golden opportunity. I mean, there are about 90,000 horses in Iceland. Of course, the Icelandic horse is the only horse in Iceland. It's been isolated there for 1,000 years. There are about 7,000 registered Icelandics in the US. For what do we have, 340 million people right now? So we are a small but mighty community. So there's a horse for about every 3 or 4 people in Iceland. And to put some perspective on it, there are about 2.5 million quarter horses registered in the US. and our mighty 7,000 registered Icelandics. There are probably more than that in the US that aren't registered, and about half of those, I think 3,600 or so, are domestic bred at this point. And we love our Canadian neighbors, and we are a very close-knit group. And we have, for instance, we have a club in Iowa. We have about 40 members. We do something together every month. Last month we did orienteering. This month we had a show. Next, we're going to do a Liberty clinic. So anyway, we just try to do fun things, trail ride, camp, whatever.
It's not all about Icelandic shows. It would be
No,
fun if it was
fun.
more about Icelandic shows. I did my first show this year, and it was so much fun, and so the people were so welcoming and so supportive. It was a great experience. But yeah, it's a very short season, and there aren't a lot of opportunities. So
Right.
Fortunately, there are a lot of things that you can do with Icelandic horses that have nothing to do with the oval track.
Right.
You know, just about everything you can think about doing with a horse, you can do with an Icelandic.
Right.
You may not be the fastest horse around the barrels, or jumping the prelim level courses, but if you want to go out and do eventing or do
Right.
cattle work, endurance riding, I mean,
They're great. Yeah, they're great
Yeah.
at endurance. I have a little Icelandic that I do classical dressage, and he went to regionals last year. I have sold some that event and have placed third, second in rated events. I have one that jumps a meter, no problem. So I do think they're a very versatile breed, but the best part about Icelandics is their character. You know, Icelandics are friendly. They're reasonably sane. They're still horses, and they're just fun to ride.
Agreed. So I know, and they're adorable.
Oh, they're adorable.
And
we have
I
lots of
know
pictures
that
of
we
me.
have a video of some horses from your farm. I would love it, Doug, if you could play that. And then Virginia, if you would just tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about
sure.
who we're looking at.
Yeah, I'll tell you who we're looking at and what we're seeing. And this is my stallion, Gosi frá Lambastöðum. And boy, isn't he a pretty guy. This is just one of our lesson horses. I just think his face is so sweet. And this is Clear. Someone asked me if I dye his hair. This is a photo from Iceland. Most of the horses are out roaming free for a good part of the year. This is one of my first foals a couple of years ago, Dee. This is my little dressage guy who went to regionals, winning lots of blue ribbons. Of course, nothing like Santa Claus on an Icelandic sleigh. And this is just snowy Iceland, and they look like yaks. Another little foal. They're so sweet. We dress up this guy as a unicorn. Everybody needs to ride the unicorn. Just this guy's all braided up now. I'm really proud of him. And these two are half siblings. You can see they look a little bit alike, meeting each other. These are two foals that were born last year, sitting side by side. This is my foal this year. Floti is his name, means escape. I think this is a very beautiful color. It's called Wind, silver dapple in Icelandic. Here's a picture of my competition track at my farm, my oval track. Here we go. This is a first prize mare, and we're showing in the oval track. Another little foal with her legs about as long as her mother's. Nice wintry picture in Des Moines, Iowa, or this is actually Truro, Iowa. These guys are best friends. They came together in Iceland. This is a picture of the Tolt in Kentucky. Has a very special look. Mama and her foal. This was my first baby. I love their manes and tails. People always ask if they can see, but I can assure you they can. Here's one of our drill teams that we did at the Iowa Horse Fair. And this is just our show from last weekend. This is one of our youngest riders saying hurrah. We also did a lot of fun classes this past weekend. We had a scavenger hunt in the woods, and this little girl has just finished that there. We did egg and spoon, and we did something called musical hoops, and we did all kinds of trail class and just fun things.
Looks great. And what an accomplishment. What a beautiful facility and beautiful horses. And I can tell this is a labor of love
Yeah,
for
it
you.
is. It is.
Well, before we move into questions, and we do have a few questions, I do want to mention that the INLUS has an agreement to sponsor advertising in the USIHC quarterly. So thank you to the INLUS for doing that, and I'm so happy to see two of my favorite organizations coming together and collaborating, and hopefully we'll be doing more of that. So we do have a few questions here, if you don't mind answering some questions. Vicky asks, do you know of any Icelandic horses doing dressage, especially in California?
Well, I do a lot of dressage. I'm doing a show this weekend, and I'm doing a show next weekend. But I don't know about dressage in California, although I'm sure there probably is someone doing it. They do something called guiding a dressage in Iceland, which is a gated dressage. And so they show all 5 gaits often in guiding a dressage. My guy, I only do classical dressage, 3-gated dressage, but absolutely. And in fact, the riding style of Icelandic riding is based on dressage. I would say the seat and the hands and the cues are, we practice a lot of the same things.
Yeah, and Vicky, I'm in California, and sadly, we have, as far as I know, no dedicated exclusively Icelandic horse trainers in California. Well, let me rephrase that. In Northern California, certainly there are in Central and Southern California, but there are not Icelandic specific trainers that will work with Icelandic horses for dressage. And I know that Icelandics do compete in dressage here in California. So that is definitely something, if you're interested in doing dressage with your Icelandic, that is definitely something you can do. My daughter has shown our Icelandic at eventing shows and has done dressage, and you get a ton of attention, and the judges, our experience, I mean, we're doing lower level stuff, of course, but our experience is that judges are very welcoming, and those that haven't judged Icelandics before are very curious. If you're doing a gated horse show, you're allowed to choose whether you want to show in your horse's natural gaits or walk, trot, canter. So if you are interested in showing Icelandic horses and dressage, you're certainly welcome to reach out to me directly, but check out the USIHC website. I think it's Icelandics.org, right?
Icelandics.org. And we also, many shows offer dressage classes as part of the show. And, a lot of them you can do in trot, tilt, canter, not much pace and walk, but we have tests that we've designed especially for Icelandics, and we include those in our shows.
Yep. And there's the name may slip my mind at the moment, but I bet I could find it by the end of the webinar. There are some online options too, where you can submit a video, you learn a dressage pattern. You can take a video and submit that video online, and I think it's called Tolt Club, if I'm remembering correctly. But it's a different test each month, and you can also compete that way. That's just, something that's fun to do. And you don't have to haul all over the place to do it. It's a very affordable way of showing and having some fun with dressage with your Icelandic horse. Somebody asked, what is the weight limit for the breed? Would you like to answer that, Virginia?
Well, we don't say it. Weight has to do with the weight of the horse should be involved as well. How big our horse is. Icelandics are pound for pound the strongest breed in the world. And they are properly termed horses and not ponies, even though they are generally under 14 two hands, generally 13 to 14 hands. And they usually weigh around 800 pounds, 750 to 900, I would say is up the spectrum. They say that Icelandics can carry up to 30% of their body weight, which is a lot. But I would qualify that with, if you're a really heavy person on any horse, I don't think it's a good idea to ride for a long period of time at a fast speed. But I would say most Icelandics are comfortable with 200 pounds, 225 pounds.
Yes, remember they are the only breed in Iceland, and men ride all day, all over the place
Right.
in Iceland.
My trainer is about 6'3" and 235 pounds. And you have to remember that this was the Viking war horse. The Icelandics are strong and fast. You can go 35 miles an hour on an Icelandic. They are not meek puppies. They are a force. Yeah.
Yep, they are. So another question, someone asked what kind of climates Icelandic horses are suited for.
Well, the climate in Iceland is rather temperate. So warmer than Iowa in the winter and colder than Iowa in the summer. The swing is more like 20 degrees Fahrenheit to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. But there is a lot of wind in Iceland. So even though it's warmer there in the winter than it is here, it's windier. But the Icelandic horse has a double coat, and the hair is about 3 times as long as an average breed. And all horses have a function called piloerection, where they stand their hair on end and they trap a layer of warmth between the outside and their body. So Icelandic horses are pretty comfortable in bitter temperatures. At my farm, I always have a barn they can walk into if they so desire, and they almost never go in, except if it's really hot, then they go in for the shade. I think the adjustment is more difficult for them for the hot than it is for the cold. There are Icelandics that I know of in Florida and Louisiana and Texas. I would say that it's probably more difficult and a more difficult adjustment for them. I'm sure they can adjust, especially if you do it slowly. I advise people, if they're importing to a climate that gets a little warmer, to import the horse in November or February, when the horse will have time to adjust to the climate, rather than, I think it would be just terrible to do it in June or July. They would be in shock.
Right.
So I would say not too hot is better.
And I think that's one of the situations where if you are living in a very warm climate, I live in Northern California and it can get quite hot here. And so for me, when I was shopping for a horse, I really wanted to find a horse that was already in California and had already made that adjustment. So
Right.
even though my horse was imported from Iceland, he had been in California for 10 years when I bought him. But certainly, looking for a horse that was bred and raised in the climate that you will have them living in. And then when you are living in warmer climates, you definitely expect to have to clip them more often. And that may mean needing to blanket them if they're living outside and you've done that clip, had to clip them. So but I think that's true with a lot of breeds of horses, right?
But, right.
We're
Arabians
always,
didn't, yeah, Arabians grew up in a warm climate. So, I mean, it just depends on the breed, but there are a lot of cold-blooded draft horses as well that
Yep.
need to be clipped if they're in a warm environment.
yes. Again, they're very adaptable, very hardy, and seem to do well in most climates with some adjustment. Are there special, are there health concerns or genetic issues that people need to be aware of?
I think Icelandic horses are about the healthiest breed out there. Icelanders don't breed horses that are not healthy. They have a very strict breeding program. No horse that is not 100% Icelandic can be registered. And you can trace on a site called Worldfinger, you can trace the lineage of your horse back several generations. And most Icelandics live well into their 30s, are ridden into their 30s, and have very few diseases. The only one that I can think of, I mean, I've had Icelandics for over 12 years, and boy, I just have had almost nothing, almost no soundness, nothing. And I had to double vaccinate them when they came because there's no disease on the island of Iceland. And so when they come to the US and there's all this disease floating around, you have to be a little protective. There is something called summer eczema that will affect Icelandics imported from Iceland more than domestic Icelandics. Now, summer eczema occurs in every breed. It's an allergy to a protein in the saliva of the Colicoides fly. But the Colicoides fly does not live in Iceland because it's not a good flyer, and Iceland is very windy. So horses that come to the US and have never been exposed to it often develop this summer eczema, which is they itch a lot. They get kind of a rash and they lose their hair, and it can be pretty serious. And you'll have to move them to a climate with less flies. I have not had any problems in Iowa, but my farm is very windy, and I do my best to keep the manure and anything that attracts flies away from my horses. But I do know that's the one thing I can think of. I also would be careful with Icelandics about too rich of grass when you're feeding to avoid laminitis. Like other smaller breeds, they would be more susceptible to that. But boy, I haven't had any on my farm.
They are easy to overfeed.
Yeah.
They are very easy keepers. Yes.
Yeah. Well, horses really can only digest 2 to 3% of their body weight per day in hay. So an Icelandic really shouldn't be eating more than about 15 pounds of hay a day. Most bales are 50 pounds. So I would say less than, quarter of a bale of hay is about all they need. And you don't even really need shoes. They don't really need grain. They're pretty easy keepers.
So what about special training?
Well, there is some special gait training. And the advantage to getting a horse from Iceland is that there are a lot of good trainers in Iceland, and you can be pretty sure that they have had good foundational training. In the US, I would say the closest training is dressage. And for gait training, best to find someone who understands Icelandics. And you would look on the Icelandics.org on the USIHC website, and you would see all of the certified trainers listed throughout the country. That would be, so there is some specialized training. I would imagine, I don't have ride saddlebreds or Missouri Foxtrotters or Pasafinos. They all have an ambling gait. But yeah, I would say better to find an Icelandic trainer.
If the special gaits are important to you.
Yes,
if walk, trot, canter is what you're after, you don't necessarily need
but
that
the giggle
specialized
gait, the tolt, most people want an Icelandic to ride the tolt, which is what I call the giggle gate, which is the one you can't stop laughing. And there's just nothing like it out there. It is just an amazing experience. But it's caused by a mutant gene in the Icelandic on the DMRT3 gene. And if both parents have this mutant gene, the horse will want to tolt. It will want to move laterally. So that gene, the mutant, disconnects the communication from the right to the left side of the body. So it won't want to move diagonally, which is what trot and canter are. And so if you get a horse with that genetics, no matter who your trainer is, it's going to want to tolt. It will choose tolt. And you will know it because you won't be able to stop smiling.
That is true. It's a great analysis. So if people are interested in riding an Icelandic, how do you recommend they find an Icelandic horse to ride?
Well, we're back to the USIHC. Go to the USIHC website, Icelandics.org, and click on farm list. I think it's under the ride tab, and it'll list all the farms that have some kind of USIHC membership, and the farm list will say which farms offer trail rides, which farms offer lessons, which farms offer sales, which farms offer a trainer. So all those things will be listed on the farm list. I had a gal come from New Mexico for a week in April to ride Icelandic horses. Just stayed for a week. We had a lot of fun.
It's probably cheaper, especially this summer. It's probably a whole lot cheaper to stay in the U.S. and find a farm in the U.S. to go visit instead of getting to Iceland.
Plus, it's about 46 degrees and raining in Iceland right now, so the weather's better.
For sure. All right. Let's see if I have any other questions. Talk about the expense of buying an Icelandic.
Well, Icelandics are, I would say, more expensive than some breeds. But if you priced it per year, it would be less. I always say, how long are you going to have this horse? And how much is it going to cost me to keep it? So a well-trained Icelandic to just trail ride in the US, anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000, just depending on if it's imported or domestic bred. You might be able to find something a little less if it's domestic bred, but what you really pay for is training. And we do not start Icelandic horses until they are 4 years of age. Horses are not fully grown until they're 6. So, asking 2-year-olds to gallop is kind of like asking 8th graders to play pro football. So you really are paying for training. And the more training the horse has had, the more expensive it's going to be. It costs about $6,000 to import a horse from Iceland to New York. So then you would have to trailer it from New York. It's about $2,500 for the flight and about $2,500 to the US government for quarantine, even though it only stays for a day. So that's about the numbers. And it just depends on what you want. You can get them, and if you want a competition horse, you can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or you don't have to.
Right. And again, the place to learn about where to buy Icelandic horses.
Go to the farm list, right?
At the USIHC, Icelandics.org. What are some of do you have other favorite websites you recommend? HorsesofIceland.is is one of my favorites.
Yep. And I like Worldfinger. You have to have a subscription to log in, but you can find out everything about the lineage of every Icelandic horse that's been registered in the world on Worldfinger. I think the Fife website is a great website, feif.org. And you can learn about Icelandics all over the world and all of the affiliate countries at Fife, and all events that, for instance, the World Championships are occurring this year in the Netherlands near Eindhoven, and they begin on August 8th to the 13th. There's something called, let's see, what are some of my others favorites? Oh, in Iceland, you can watch all the competitions, and yeah, it's there's a wealth of Icelandic horse information in Europe.
And I think you, when you are a member of the USIHC, you automatically get
Right.
membership with the other
That's right, to World
organizations,
Finger.
correct?
You do have to activate it. A lot of people might not even know they have a membership to World Finger, but you can go on and activate it with your USIHC membership.
Great. And you mentioned the World Championships this summer. Do we have American riders that will be going to compete? Are they going to be taking
Yes,
horses
we
from the
just
US?
announced our team yesterday, and we have 6 riders who have qualified to ride in the World Championships. Now, of course, it's a great expense to take your horse to Europe, and I don't know that they will all go, but we have 6 that have qualified to go. And it's a good team with some high scores. And, you know, in the past, the US has not always been at the top, but I can tell you right now, we have 2 US riders who are at the top of the world ranking in their respective categories. So that's really exciting.
Feel free to name names.
Well,
Exciting stuff.
Lucy Nold is at the top of the world ranking in V2, which is Group 4 gate. And Laura Benson is at the top of the world ranking in T3, which is Group Loose Rein Toll. So fantastic. And Lucy's horse is a domestic bred horse. So that was born in California.
Very exciting. Yeah.
Yep.
West
Very
Coast.
exciting. Yeah. Yep.
Wow. Well, that's great. And does the USIHC help offset any of the expenses for the competitors?
We offset some of the competition expenses for people who are hosting competitions or clinics. As far as the World Championships go, we have some funding for the maintenance there, stalls, things like that. But a lot of it is on the competitors, getting their horse there, getting themselves there. Each person can take one other person with them. That's all paid for by individuals.
Oh, well, that's passion for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and how exciting to have a hobby that you get to travel the world and do.
Right. And you know, there are about as many horses in Icelandic horses in Germany as there are in Iceland. In fact, there are more Icelandic horses in Germany than there are big horses at this point. And so you can ride Icelandic horses in a lot of places. They're very popular in Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, Denmark as well. Finland. Yeah.
I had a friend who went to Paris and was going to try to connect with an Icelandic horse farm just outside of Paris to see if she could do some riding while she was in France as well. Pretty cool. There was a question about how well imported horses adapt to life in the US.
Well, again, it depends on the horse. They're very individual. Some horses adapt really easily, especially if they come over with another horse. I always equate it to going to China and you don't speak the language and you don't like the food and you don't have any friends. But I find that if a horse comes over with other horses, they do quite well. I had an experience recently where I had imported a horse, and then several years later, I imported a horse from the same farm. And the first horse ended up coming to my farm for some reason, and they obviously remembered each other. I mean, they whinnied and they were like, "Oh, I know you." So it really touched me that they do remember each other. I think it's easier if they're on the younger side. I'm going to say 5 to 8, 9, 10. I think when the horses are older and they're imported, it is a little harder. That's just my opinion. But some horses are 25 and adjust beautifully to new surroundings. It just depends on the horse.
And how well do Icelandics get along with other breeds?
Oh, they get along with everybody. I have a mule right now with one of my Icelandics, and I'm sure she speaks Icelandic, the mule, because they're just she's really protective of them. I find it sometimes the big horses look at the Icelandics and spook a little bit. What is that? But the Icelandics are always, they have such big personalities. They're always the most magnanimous in the herd.
I tell people, if you are not willing to be the center of attention at every show or parade or trail ride or event that you take your horse to, you probably shouldn't get an Icelandic, because they are like magnets.
Yes,
Everybody wants to know about your pony,
right.
which is really sweet. But it is definitely something to consider. You're not going to blend into the background on an
No,
Icelandic.
they're very distinctive looking. They have distinctive personalities, big personalities. My horses always come to me when I walk in the paddock. They always want to be petted and loved, and they're always eager to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, they're lots of fun. Let me see if there are any other questions here before we end. One thing I did want to also mention, for anyone who is considering shopping for an Icelandic and exploring the breed, one of the resources that the USIHC has is a document, like a checklist for people that are buying, that are considering buying an Icelandic horse. It gives you some great, very thoughtful questions.
Yeah, riding horse assessment form.
Yes.
And there are two parts to it. One is completed by the trainer, and one is or the horse owner, and one is completed by the purchaser. So what are they looking for? Do they want a forward horse? Do they want a slower horse? Do they want a mare? Do they want a gelding, tall, short? And then the trainer evaluating the horse can sort of say, this horse is probably not the right horse for you. I think it's best I'm not a fan of buying a horse I haven't seen. I think it's a good idea to go ride the horse, and more than once. That would be my opinion. 3 times minimum. It's a significant financial investment, and probably worth making sure that it's the best fit for you, because you may have that horse for 20 years.
And they are not all the same.
No.
You may have ridden one that was a very certain way, and that's what you want. The next one you ride may not be anything like that.
Right. I call it the magic. If it's right, I mean, no horse is perfect. There's something wrong with every horse, but you have to say, I love it anyway. I mean, it may not be the color you imagined. It may not be the sex you imagined. It may not have long hair, but you're okay with that because you just have that connection with the animal. And when it's right, you have the magic.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Virginia, for sharing your wealth of knowledge and passion for the breed. I could talk about Icelandics all day long.
So good.
But we did promise to keep it to an hour or under. So hopefully for the folks that were joining us today, hopefully you got some great resources. You understand a little bit more about the United States Icelandic Horse Congress, the importance of it to Icelandic horses in the US. And if you are thinking about buying an Icelandic, I really encourage you to check out the USIHC, contact some trainers or breeders or farms in your area and go and ride some. They are really wonderful. And I know Virginia would be happy to point you in the right direction if you
Absolutely.
have questions or need more assistance. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I think that is it for us.
Well, thanks, Diane, thanks, Carrie, thanks, Diane, and everyone have a great night. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for the information. I think we do have one movie clip or one clip that shows the different gates
Oh, yeah, that'd be good to
that
play.
horses that the Icelandics have. And while Doug is getting that queued up, I just want to encourage everyone to take advantage of the many local celebrations of Icelandic and Nordic heritage that are coming up over the next few months. If you are in a location where there is no such celebration, I want to remind you that June 17th is Iceland's Independence Day, so have a celebration of your own. And whether you're celebrating at an organized event or on your own, take a picture and send it to us. We'd like to use your photos in the September issue of our Connect newsletter. You can send your photos to info@inlus.org. And so just stay tuned for upcoming webinars, authors corners, language classes, and other events. I just want to thank very much all of those who support the INLUS through memberships and donations. Our events and classes just would not be possible without you. So here's something to close out our webinar for today.
Aren't they beautiful?
There's just
Feel free-
something absolutely stunning about those manes and tails flying in the wind.
Yeah.
Feel free to throw in your commentary, Virginia, if you have any.
Well, I just think you can see the power of this horse, and they're so round that even if you're tall, they take up your leg. And here's a gallop, and I think Tolt is next. That's the gait that most Americans want to feel. This is a master trainer here. Okay, here's the Tolt. This is a 4-beat gait, similar footfall to the walk. And look how this horse is you can see it's very smooth to ride. And I just can't stop smiling. It's too much fun. You can see left hind, left front, right hind, right front. Beautiful, beautiful lift in the front here on this horse. And this is the flying pace. Not all Icelandics have the flying pace, but some do. And it is a lateral gait where both legs on each side move at the same time. And then there's a moment when all 4 feet are off the ground. So it feels like you're flying. And they can go fast. You go I mentioned earlier, about 35 miles an hour at the pace and about 25 miles an hour at the Tolt. So those are the gaits. I hope you all enjoyed it, and contact me anytime. My favorite topic.
Well, thank you. Thank you again so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you here this evening. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. I hope you've had as much fun as we've had and enjoyed watching the horses at the end. Thanks so much and have a great summer. Bye-bye.
Okay. Good night.